There we go. Okay, good morning, everyone. So we are up to chapter 9. Now, as we explained before, the halachos are not governed by the chapters over here. They are just going in order of different halachos, different laws regarding the laws of Lashon Hara. What the different titles, the themes of the chapter are different ways to be able to conquer, or different things that might be a part of what brings one to speak Lashon Hara or Rechilas, right? Or how to overcome those challenges. And that's really part of the section of this book, what we call grow your humility. Over here, this one is grow humility. If you remember, the last chapter was grow your good eye. Right? If you just keep on going, just a little explanation, right? You go back to page 203, it's grow your forgiveness, right? So the name of the chapter is regarding the next page, where it gives you different insights and different things. So this chapter will be working primarily with humility, right? How to the concept of humility. So I just want to talk about it for a minute, and then we'll go into the halacha, and then hopefully we'll be able to conclude with this thought of humility, how it connects. So if you look at the beginning of chapter 9, they have a little paragraph, and this paragraph is pretty straightforward. And if you go ahead and read it, right? But I'll just I want to touch on 2 points, which is really one point that they're trying to bring out of the essence of what humility means, right? So the way they bring this in is like this, and I'm going to read the first. There's only one possession we need in order to be important in the world: a Jewish soul. That's it. Right now, it goes ahead and it says, right, with this one asset, we have everything: a mission to perform, right? Connection to our master of the universe, Hashem, right? And to Torah, right? To give us a guide and meaningful life. Everything else we have, money, right? Talent, strength, family, friends, and more, is not ours at all. It is a resource that Hashem has loaned us for us to fulfill, right, our purpose. Knowing this will keep us humble, which keeps our words humble as well. And that's the point over here. The idea is like this, right? What is the concept of being humble, right? And we've given classes on this idea before, right? And we're going to talk about it connecting to Lashon Hara, but it's important just to get into a little bit. What is the concept of being humble? Right, so humble. Sometimes we have this, picture in our mind of this, like the settled kind of person, walking and having nothing, whatever, it's okay, I'm like, that's like what we assume means humble, right? It's like person like doesn't think much about himself, right? He's not a loud person. They're not outspoken. Right, they're not, in the limelight. That's what we assume, right? At least I started learning, right? That's what humble means, and that's sort of the picture that people give out. But it's so far from the truth. The Torah tells us, right, that the most humble person of all times. Who is the most humble person of all times? And you guys can unmute yourself. Okay, Bonnie Warden. Right, very good. Moshe, right? Moshe Rabbeinu, right? Moses was the most humble person of all times. Now, was Moses, let's as we have this terminology, lemala. Guys ever heard the word lemala? No, Jim's shaking his head. Suzette is shaking her head. Emily, you ever heard the word lemala? No, she's also shaking her head. Okay, so I'm going to teach you guys a new word, lemala, right? Lemala is like a term that is used for like someone that's like shy and it's like not outgoing and it doesn't really have it put together, right? He's a little lemala, right? He's a lemala. I don't know if it's like a mix of Yiddish and Hebrew or Lashon HaKodesh. I'm not sure exactly, right? But as it definitely is Yiddish, probably, because I remember the term. As a lemala, right? As a lemala, he's a lemala.
He's a nebish. What about nebish? I mean, when he's nebish, Dick. I mean, no.
Nebish.
Yeah. That's not the same.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe. Yeah. Maybe. Okay.
Okay. No,
right? Yeah, so that's a but Moshe Rabbeinu was anything but that, right? Moshe Rabbeinu went in front of Paro and he spoke. Moshe Rabbeinu did the 10 plagues. Moshe Rabbeinu dealt with Jewish people, right? And oh my gosh, being in community work, I give high five to Moshe for dealing with the whole Jewish nation, right? We got to just deal with one congregation, right? In one small town, right? Moshe dealing with the whole Jewish nation, right? He had to have pretty broad shoulders, right? Moshe Rabbeinu went up to heaven to Shemaim and bring down the Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu, spoke very sharply to Korach and to Dasan of Aviram, and he said, "Listen, if you guys don't, follow what Hashem said, you guys are going to have a weird death, and the earth swallow him up." So he was no, shy. Thank you. That's a good English word, right? He wasn't shy, but still, he's considered Anam Mikol Adam. So we have to re-understand, or maybe you guys don't need to, right? But at least let's understand, what does it mean to be humble? What does that mean? Example. What does humbleness mean? And the answer that I once heard, and Rav Dessler speaks about this, and many speak about this idea, is that why was Moshe Rabbeinu Anam Mikol Adam? Why was Moshe Rabbeinu the most humble man of all times? He worked on himself, of course, and he was the most spiritual man. But Moshe Rabbeinu also, right, had the greatest knowledge of God. Right? He had the greatest knowledge of it. He went up to heaven. He was up with God for 40 days. He was powwowing with God for 40 days and 40 nights, right? They were learning, and they were, the greatest chavrusa, right? Moshe Rabbeinu had the best chavrusa, right? Study partner, right? He was learning with God for 40 days and 40 nights. So Moshe Rabbeinu had the greatest knowledge of how much spirituality one could attain. And since he focused on the concept of how much there is, he realized how much more there is to learn. Realized how much more of a responsibility he has. Humbleness, what we call as anava, right, is humbling oneself and realizing that there's more to do, and the responsibility that one has with the talents that God gave him. And that's exactly what they're saying. Everything that we have, our finances, our strength, our good voice, our artistic talents, right? Our connections, our ability to talk to people, right? Our family, our soulmate. Yes, we went and we dated, or some people a couple of years, some people a couple of weeks. Right? I guess it all depends on your culture, right? But we did our thing, right? We try to have babies, and we thank God we have children, right? But some people don't. Some people, they date for years and they do the due diligence. They're not just sitting there around and they can't find their soulmate, right? Some people get many degrees and they still don't have a job, or they have a low-paying job, right? Some people win the lottery and they're millionaires, right? I read this article about this lady that was one digit off from the 623 billion lottery just a couple of weeks ago. One digit off. She was one digit off from being a billionaire, half a trillionaire, almost a trillionaire. One digit off. Then the next week, two people won. These things that we have, and our physical strength, and everything that we have, is a gift from God. Now, this gift that God gave us should not make us think that we're better than other people, because he gave us this gift. He gave each one a different gift. It is a responsibility that we have. It's a responsibility that we have. That's how we understand what humility is. Humility is not thinking that you're better than other people because of what you have, or you're worse than other people because of what you don't have. Also, humility is realizing whatever Hashem gave you, you have to go ahead and utilize that to be able to get closer to Hashem. And it's a responsibility. So if you have X amount of money, God tells us we have to give 10%. You want to give a little more? That's great. But 10%, that's what you got to give. You have ability to write articles and things like that. So offer your time to synagogue, to school, or just go ahead and write inspirational articles. You have the power of the pen. Go ahead. There's some people that are so powerful in their pen. Other people, like, they could try to put something together and, okay, whatever, we get the point, but you're not moved by it. Then you have some people that could give you information, but you're not moved by their talk, and other people that have that ability. Other people could draw things that inspire you. Some people are storytellers. Right? Some people are great in math and they do great things and help people with their finances. Right? Yes, you have to make a living too, but at the same time, you could also give charity of your time. There's a million things. If we look at everything that we've got, someone's good at shooting a basketball. Right? Good. Yeah, God gave them that talent. They're good at shooting a basketball. Go ahead and be a basketball player, but then be a good role model to everyone. Right? Realize that the society looks at this as something that's whatever, and you become a spotlight. So now be a good role model. Utilize that fame that you have for something positive. Why are you able to shoot a basketball better than me? Okay, it's talent, right? I'm Canadian, okay, right? But there is talent, right? And there is working hard, but there's certain things that you have that skill. You have good hand coordination. You're good at it. You have to home in that. You have to work on it, right? You got to make sure that you utilize it for the best that you can. But it's a talent. So the only thing that you have that's yours is your neshama. It means to say your ability to connect with God, with whatever God gives you. That's yours. Everything else is a gift. And when we start thinking about that, then we start humbling ourselves. Right? That's not what we do, but we start realizing a responsibility. We could walk with our heads held high. We could be involved in community. We could be outspoken. We could be outspoken with respect. We'll be outspoken with humility. We'll be outspoken with understanding that other people have different views. We'll be outspoken with the thing that I'm not doing this because I want a voice. I'm not doing it because I want other people to follow me. I'm doing it because I feel that I have a responsibility. And then what happens. It's out of my hands. It's out of my hands. I have to do what I have to do. That's the power of humility. That's what true humility is. Any questions or comments before we move on to the next segment? Okay. Joseph's shaking his head. Anybody? No, Emily's shaking her head.
Question, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Uh-oh. Okay, I'm on my phone and I don't know how to turn it off. Oh, okay. I lost the video of the podcast and I don't know how to turn it off or on. So sorry.
Okay, you're fine. No, go ahead. What's your question?
Okay, well, no, my concern is at some point I might be making noise and I want to turn it off and I can't do it.
So there should be a little mic on the bottom part of your phone. So if you could just press that mic and then you'll be able to turn it off.
Okay, I don't see it. I may have to just turn the phone off and start over. Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just
no
trying
problem. No problem. No problem.
Thank you.
I have a quick question, Rabbi.
Go ahead, Yosef.
Since I'm new to the class, what sefer are you using as a source?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, Yosef. I apologize. We are learning right now the sefer called Master Your Word.
Oh, yeah, Chafetz Chaim.
Yeah, through the Chafetz Chaim Heritage Foundation, right? It's called Master Your Words, Master Your Life. We've been learning it now for about 1.5 years, and we are up to page 236 right now. If you need a copy, I might have one more. I think I ran out. I might still have one more. I might not. I don't know. I'm not sure. But you could definitely get it online.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry, I should have. I forgot that you weren't on the class before. But okay. So if there's no other questions or comments on what we just spoke about, let's now get into the fun part. Okay, guys. So I want to know what you guys think about this interesting scenario, something that happens very often. I think there's a lot of different points to speak about in this scenario. And the scenario like this, the way they bring the scenario is, someone who drinks too much, right? Anybody know someone that drinks too much, right? We're seeing him in many kiddushes and many simchas, clearly, right? Page 236. Page 236. Okay. Right, and he's intoxicated. He's drinking. He has it. You can smell it on his breath. Right, he's embarrassing people and behaving irresponsibly. Right, not like having a couple of chimes and giving a nice pat on the back. this we don't see too many people like that, but we might all know someone, right, has a little drinking problems. Now, someone tells you that he saw this person leaving a wedding, right, preparing once again to drive his car while intoxicated, and he took the person's keys away from him. Right? May you believe this report? So there's a couple of different things I want you to think about. Number one, what's the purpose of the conversation? Right? Are you allowed to believe it? Right? Are you allowed to be part of that conversation? And if you are allowed to be part of the conversation, are you allowed to believe the report? Right? Is there a difference? Because remember, in the past we said you're allowed to you're allowed to protect yourself. That's why we have locks on our doors, right? And if you're living in a bad neighborhood, you're allowed to believe to the extent that you're living in a bad neighborhood. Right? You're allowed to lock your car, right? But you also can judge the person, right? We had this balance, right? So in this scenario, are you allowed to believe the person, right? Are you allowed to even have that conversation? Jim is raising his hand. We'll start off with Jim in the house. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, you probably shouldn't continue in the conversation, but the question that came up in my mind was, what difference does it make whether you believe it or not? You have seen with your own eyes the person get drink too much, so it doesn't matter whether this person took their keys away or not, frankly. To me, it would to me.
Okay, so did you guys hear him, or you want me to repeat that? You heard him? Okay. Okay, any thoughts on that? Feel free to unmute yourselves. Anybody want to respond to Jim or say anything else? Feel free to unmute yourselves. Hey, you're all very quiet today.
I think if you were witness to it, the assumption is you were a witness to his keys being taken away?
No,
you just heard about it?
the person is coming and telling you. You've seen him at a kiddish drinking too much, right? Then acting a little, floozy and embarrassing himself a little bit. But many kiddishes, yeah. Even if let's say one or two kiddishes, many kiddishes, right? But you didn't see him leaving the wedding, right, and going into his car, right? The person is telling you that.
But you wouldn't be in a position to do anything about it.
Okay, so Chayla is asking, and that's sort of responding to, are you in the position to do anything about it? Okay, that's a good point to think about. We have to.
I think if you've seen the guy, drunk a lot of times, then I don't think it's I understand the idea of not believing Lashon Hara, but it seems sort of like something, I don't see how you could not believe it just because you've already seen the person like that. So I would say that you can believe it just because you yourself have experienced it. But I'm with Jim that, like, who cares? Like, what? I don't really understand how it's relevant. Like, someone took the guy's keys away. Okay, so it's just reinforcing your knowledge of this person. It's like, okay, he was drunk again. Okay, great. So now I think it's annoying the person told you in the first place, right? Because there's no toelas for you to hear about that. But I don't think you have to say, like, oh, I can't believe it, because you already know the guy's like that.
Okay, good point. So you're saying similar to Jim, Chayla is sort of bringing that point. That is like, what's the purpose of this? Very good. Anybody else?
I'm inclined to think the same way.
Okay, we're all jumping on the same bandwagon over here. Go ahead.
And we're probably all wrong, but
No.
I would just like to say that it's another step, though, because he took keys away. It's an action that the other person did, and now you're involved kind of in that by listening to it, maybe.
Okay, well, I'm gonna bring out your point in a couple of minutes, Martha. You are touching on something that, of course, in this scenario might not be so significant, but that's the point they're trying to bring out. Good point, Martha. Anybody else? Nope. Suzette, do you usually have something to say?
Well, I pretty much agree with the comments. I think what I'm trying to work in my mind is how it's going to connect with humility. So that's what I'm trying to think through right here. But I agree with the comments.
So just to answer that, as I explained, the halacha itself not necessarily has to do with humility. It's
Okay.
part that we do. It's the next page, 237, always a second page. That's where they're bringing out the humility. This actual case not necessarily has to do with humility. So I'm glad you brought that up. sort of just to make sure that that's clear. Okay, anybody else? Any other thoughts? Okay, so the point they're trying to bring out, let's read the halakha and then we're going to expand on it, okay? The halakha is like this. If you know the person drinks, right, excessive, and have seen him overindulge with your own eyes, the prohibition against believing the negative information does not apply. If you know that someone committed a certain sin because of temptation, you may believe he's done so again. However, you may not believe that this time he's done it out of malicious, thus taking his transgression up a notch, right? And this is the point they're trying to bring out. And they brought it out in a case of drinking, which is a bad thing. Now, I want to first address, before I get into that, I want to first address the elephant in the room. And I think this is what's bothering a lot of people. And I actually spent some time this morning, a whole 5 minutes of thinking about this. Sorry. No, I'm just kidding. I actually spent some time on this question. That was the first thing that struck me too. Like, what is the purpose of this person saying this? The second he starts talking about this person, I said, stop. Right? What's the toelis? What's the purpose? Why is this conversation even happening? Right. So I think they're trying to bring out 2 points. And I looked it up in the Chafetz Chaim with the commentaries on the bottom. Right. And they're bringing out 2 points. Number one, right, it might be important because since this person already is known that he's a drinker, right? Now that he's taken it to a new level, and Martha, this is the point I think you're trying to bring out. Now that he's taken to a new level of actually going into a car, okay, if he's been playing around, being a little, floozy at kiddush or whatever, embarrassing himself a little bit, okay, that's bad, right? But that's not potentially actually harming anybody. And if now that the person's coming and telling you, and you know this person, you must be in the same community. You might be at another simcha, bar mitzvah, bas mitzvah, a bris, whatever it is, another opportunity where the person might get into a car right after drinking, or a wedding, another wedding. Therefore, it's good to know ahead of time that this person has crossed another line, right? That he's not taken into consideration or is too intoxicated, right? He doesn't think of taking a cab or getting someone else a drink. So therefore, you can even go. Now you have that information. Next time you're at a wedding or at a simcha where you can drive, not on Shabbos, right? But you can drive, right? So then you now have you're armed with. You can go over to the guy and say, "Hey, listen, here, why don't you give me your keys now before you." We know you're going to drink, let's be honest, right? And I'm not going to judge you for that, but why don't you give me your keys now that you don't get into a scenario later when you don't realize that you might be doing something that's dangerous. So there could be a toeles. There is a possibility of something where you could, right? Jim's giving me a face like I'm stretching a little bit, right? But it is a small toeles, but it is compacted with, and I think the main point they're trying to bring out is that when something is known to everyone and someone is doing something that is wrong, it might not be the right thing to do, to speak or to listen, but the prohibition of lashon hara, the prohibition of believing or saying something of someone doing something is only, as you remember, we started off, it says in the Torah, amisecha, you're a countryman, right? And someone one can be a countryman in all other things, but if someone is known that he's doing something wrong, and that's why they said a transgression, sin, avera, right? Someone is known that he does a certain avera, right? So for that concept, he's not called amisecha. Someone that's amisecha is someone that is doing what we're supposed to be doing, right? And of course, also, we all have desires and we all have challenges, and evil inclination attacks all of us in different ways. And there could be a difference of if the person grew up, knowing not to do this, or he didn't know not to do it. There's various different levels, right? But if someone has already been known that he's transgressed and he's done this many times, right? So the technical halacha of lashon hara, right, does not apply. It's still important, and I want to rephrase this, and I saw the commentary speak this out. And it's still important not to engage because it's not healthy to engage unless there is a purpose. And if the person feels that you are the person that might be able to go over to him at the next simcha and say, hey, stop doing this, then you're allowed to believe it, right? And you're allowed to go ahead. But otherwise, even though there might not be the technical halacha of lashon hara, right? Because it is something that is known, and it's something that you've seen with your own eyes, right? And something that is the person has unfortunately done many times, right? And you've seen it with your own eyes, right? But it's still not a good practice to do, right? Because just because something is technically not prohibited doesn't mean to say that you should go ahead and do it, because then you might yourself be accustomed to talking or listening to something that's negative. Even though over here it's not technically prohibited, you might go ahead and do it in a place where it is prohibited, right? Because you are now not, you're letting your guard down a little bit, right? So even though technically it might be okay, but one still has to be careful unless it's a purpose. And that's why a far stretched purpose could be a purpose, right? You might be able, if this person feels that you might be able to go ahead and tell them not to do that, right? So, or let's say whatever, a different transgression, they might think that this is something that you'll be able to have a conversation with that person. We think that, you could grow through this or whatever it is, right? So even if it's a small stretch, which typically it might not fall into the concept of toelas, but over here, since it's a small purpose, therefore you're allowed to accept what they said. Now, the last thing they said, and then I'm going to take questions or comments, right? The last thing they said is also very important. And that's another point I think, Martha, you're trying to say. There's different levels to transgressions, right? There's different steps. And if you've seen the person do it out of just desire or not knowing or lack of understanding or just, evil inclination just got us, right? But it's not malicious. It's not out of intent. It's not like you're going to say, okay, I want to commit this avera, right? That's not what you're doing, right? So then if the person goes ahead and tells you, oh, this person, they just lost it, right? They went ahead and they say, I want to go ahead and eat this cheeseburger. Right? So then you're not allowed to believe them, because that's taking the avera to the next step. Right? That's taking the transgression, right, to a new level, and that you haven't seen, and that's now a new level of concept of lashon hara. So lashon hara, we're sort of splitting hairs a little bit. But lashon hara is not only just hearing someone say something bad, right? Lashon hara is even when there's no prohibition of lashon hara, in the case where this is something that's known, or there might be a purpose or whatever it is. But if the person goes ahead and tells you, or you are going to assume, oh, maybe they're doing it now more maliciously, they're more intent, which makes the avera transgression even more worse, because in halakha, there's differences if someone's doing it out of lack of knowledge, or someone's doing it out of desire, or someone's doing it out of just lazy or whatever it is, or then if someone's doing it intentionally, right? I want to commit, I don't believe in 613, I don't whatever, right? He's doing it maliciously, that's a greater transgression. Right, and therefore that itself would go ahead and also constitute as a level of lashon hara. Okay, any comments or questions before we move to the next part? Wow, this is a first. Usually you guys are like all over me. All right, okay, so then let's move on. Okay, so now I want to the next part, page 237, right? And Suzette, this is where we're going to now talk about the concept of humbleness, right? Rav Dessler brings out a tremendous point, and this is how we're going to connect it, how being more humble, right, and working on our arrogance and our being self-absorbed, and working more on being humble and is a way of protecting ourselves from lashon hara. So it's like this, right? They say like this: if a person in a person's drive to move himself away from lashon hara or whatever it is, right? One has to realize, and I'm not going to read the whole paragraph. I'm just going to say it outside. Go ahead and read it. Person has to realize that one of the biggest desires to speak negative about other people is to put the other person down. Why? Because unfortunately, God created us, that human nature is that you feel better when someone else is down. An unhealthy person, right, feels better when someone else is down. So therefore, you want to knock the other person down, even if it's a small little thing. Oh, you saw what I did? And yeah, they came late to shul again. You also came to shul late again, right? But you feel better because the other person also can't shoot lane again. It's like, right? You feel better, right? You feel better about yourself because I'm not like that person that whatever. There's a million different things, right? They leave their garbage can out until Wednesday. It's terrible, right? Like, why can't they just bring their garbage can in Tuesday morning, right? Garbage collection by us is Monday, right? I'm gonna say Tuesday morning. Well, why can't they just bring it in Tuesday morning? Why can't they just bring it in? Well, why do they have it out until Saturday? Right? Whatever it is, it's like a small, stupid little thing, but you feel better because you're doing something that they're not, right? Or they're doing something else, right? So it says Rav Dessler, right? Rav Dessler says that comes from pride, right? A person feels that he can take pride in his intellectual way only by putting someone else down, putting themselves above the other person, not by lifting themselves up, but putting the other person down. And that, says Rav Dessler, that's where Lashon Hara comes from. What Lashon Hara again is the truth. Rechilas is when it's false, right? Lashon Hara, right? When you're saying the truth, or even if you're not saying it, you're saying it's not the truth. Of course, if you're not saying the truth, even if you're saying the truth, or somewhat of a truth, there's no purpose to it, and that's the depth of what Toelis is. Why is Toelis okay? Because the essence of Lashon Hara, says Rav Dessler, we're digging deep into this. The essence of Lashon Hara, says Rav Dessler, is that you are just using this opportunity to knock someone else down just to make yourself feel better. Truth or not truth. You feel better by knocking the other person down. Now, when there's a purpose for it, to help the other person out, right, to protect people, or whatever it is, right, whatever category, whatever is under the category of Toelas, so now you are not saying something about the other person to knock them down, to make yourself feel better. You're saying something about the other person for a third purpose, right? For a different purpose, not for make yourself feel better and to knock the other person down, but now a different purpose, to protect the person, to make sure that this person has all the information before they get into business with each other, to make sure that this community knows that this about a babysitter, about cleaning help, whatever it is, right? A shidduch, match, whatever constitutes about Talis, they're helping your kid in school, right? So there's a third reason now, right, that you're saying this. Once you're focusing on that reason, the toxic component that the Torah is telling us about Lashon Hara, right? Because God, whatever He tells us, the spiritual toxic component for our neshama is gone. So now I'm saying the truth. I'm helping someone else out. I said that's not prohibited. I'm not prohibiting that. I'm not prohibiting that. No toxic. It's not toxic to neshama, and that's really the essence of what Toelis. Why Toelis is okay. There's no reason to make a prohibition when it's Toelis, and therefore says Rav Dessler, how does one combat this? How do we overcome this? Number one, working on ourselves. And number two, says Rav Dessler, is always trying to havat Yisrael, to love your fellow person, to make yourself a person that's constantly trying to elevate other people, right? Don't lower your values in any way, not to lower yourself, right? To try to make them lower, and that's how you feel better about yourself. But make yourself feel better about yourself by doing something positive. Go to Minyan, right? Eat a little more kosher, right? Say something nice about someone else, right? Hold yourself back from commenting and saying something negative about someone else, right? Make sure that you give a little more charity, right? You go ahead and you give a hug to someone, right? Just because they need it, right? Smile at someone else, right? The way to elevate yourself is and that's true humility. True humility, as we said, is realizing that everything you have is there as a responsibility, right? And I don't need to make myself feel better by knocking someone else down. I can make myself feel better by elevating myself. That could be through helping other people or building my relationship with my Father in heaven and realizing how much of a responsibility I have because of all the talents and all the possessions and everything that God gave me. When we start changing our mindset and thinking in a positive way and thinking that we have talents, we have strength, we have tremendous abilities that God gave us, and we're going to go ahead and focus on that to make ourselves feel better, then automatically we're thinking positive. The negative is not going to creep in. It might, we're still humans. We have to work on that. But the more we focus on the positive, right, the less and less we'll need to make ourselves feel better by knocking other people down. And the more we don't need to knock other people down, the more, right, we will stop saying Lashon Hara. Just want to do the quote of the day, and then I'll turn off the recording. We'll take questions and comments or anything else we want to talk about. All right, the quote of the day is a very famous concept, right? And it says like this: everyone must have two pockets. In one should be placed the phrase, "The world was created just for me," and in the other, "I am but dust and ashes." That is true humility. True humility is realizing that everything is created as me. I gave a whole class on this, and we're not going to go into it right now, but just very quickly, right? What does it mean the world was created just for me? It sounds very arrogant. It means to say the world was created just for me means to say I have a responsibility for this world. It means to say just for me means to say just me have a responsibility. Every person has to look that it's my responsibility, not to take because it's created by me. It's my responsibility. How do we make sure that we think in that way and not, I want everything, it's all for me, but on the contrary, my responsibility is the next phrase. I'm but just dust and ashes. We're going to go back. We're created from earth. We'll go back to earth, just ashes, right? We're just a physical structure. Our neshama is who we are. When we think about this, right, then we're able to have a healthy balance of our self-esteem, right, thinking positively, and at the same time, not talking in a negative way, being humble. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today.